I think psychedelics create just enough space between our thoughts, emotions, and our consciousness. I do have one story that does stand out. One of my clients was a professional hockey player, and his career ended because of a neck injury back in 2006. For me, one of the hardest experiences was realizing that the person that I was trying to run away from becoming was the exact person I had become.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Life Beyond Boxes podcast. My name is Marian. I'm your host, and I have my co-host here, Victor Shaves. Victor, what's up?
Hey, how's everyone doing?
And special guest today, Palveshey Tariq. Welcome to the podcast. I'm actually excited. I'll have a lot of, quote-unquote selfish questions. But I want to, first of all, again, welcome to the show.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you, if you don't mind, give us a quick backstory, as much as you'd like to go, but then I'll have some questions, because right before we hit record, we were chatting about it, and I was really amazed by your story. So if you don't mind, if you do us a little intro into your life, and then we'll dive slowly into how you got into today's topic and everything else.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on. As far as my story goes, I guess I'll start with where we left off.
Yeah.
So I was born in New York, and when I was 8 months old, I was put up for adoption to family in Pakistan. And then when I was 6 years old, my biological parents found me and brought me back to America. And that transition wasn't easy. It was a new culture, a new family, a new language. And my biological parents had very different ways of raising us than what my adopted parents had taught me. And so I never really got used to that. I went away from home when I was 17 years old, and I was homeless for my senior year of high school. So I spent most of that year sleeping on park benches until I got a scholarship. I went to the University of Florida. I triple majored in mathematics, political science, and linguistics because fear had been driving me, and I was like, I'm never going to be homeless again, so I got to cover all of my bases. Now, with that said, my first job out of college was at a taco joint on the beach. So I'm not sure how much that helped. But I think afterwards I ended up marrying my best friend at the time, and quite honestly, I treated him the way I was treated. I used to hit him and yell at him, and so we got divorced, and instead of paying attention to what was going on inside, I distracted myself with more education. And so I went on to Harvard and did a dual master's in finance and software engineering. I created a crypto hedge fund and a blockchain think tank, which I recently repurposed into a metaverse think tank in the hopes of raising the next generation a little more consciously. Sold the blockchain or the hedge fund, and once again, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I pursued a doctorate in quantum physics. And by the end of it all, I finally had the titles, the money, food in my belly, roof over my head, and I was more depressed than when I started. And so that was the point at which I quit my job, I sold my house, I moved, and I started meditating after an experience with psychedelic mushrooms. So
Wow,
that's like
that's
the gist of it.
Yeah, and I probably spend a few hours just on going in and out of the story. But wow, that's really a life story. Thanks for sharing that with us. So today you're a psychedelic life coach, right?
Yes, integration coach.
Integration. Okay, you define that. Like you don't just coach people, you actually help them implement strategies that you talk about?
Yeah, so the psychedelic experience can be jarring for many individuals where they have insights that perhaps they weren't ready for or didn't prepare for. And after those insights, they come back to their regular daily lives and they're like, now what? How do I do with all this information?
Habits.
How do I proceed? And so that's part of the integration process, that you don't have to just give up your whole life that you've already built because you perhaps had new insights. There's a way to intertwine those lessons and learnings into your daily life.
Gotcha. Do you mind me asking, like, how, because it's a interesting gap between all the incredible studies that you've done versus what you do today. Where is the trigger, like, triggered the exact transition in, like, what you realize, like, oh, you can do so many things, type of jobs, and you decided to take the route of being an entrepreneur. Where was that transition and how did it happen?
For me, I think the transition happened when I throughout my studies, I noticed that I was having a harder and harder time paying attention. And so I spoke to one of my professors about it. They recommended I go see the school or therapist, and they diagnosed me with ADHD. Of really asking me what was happening while I was zoning out. They prescribed me ADHD medication, and that turned into a pretty big problem. Because at first I was like, wow, this is like a super drug where I feel superhuman. I was like focused, completely present, but that didn't last long because I became more and more addicted to it. And
The
so
body needs more, the resistance and
The
then
tolerance,
amphetamines. And so I became addicted to that, and to take the edge off, I started drinking lots of alcohol. And that led to a point where my left kidney failed. And that was the point at which, and I started feeling suicidal. I told my psychiatrist about it, and they prescribed me antidepressants on top of it.
So now you got amphetamines on one end, and then you got antidepressants on the other end, and they definitely, disclaimer, all like this entire episode, it's not medical advice, it's like this is just entertaining purposes. But crazy to think that you would, and I've heard so many similar cases, mainly on YouTube and podcasts. I'm a big fan of everything that has to do with productivity, peptides, anything that you can use to kind of make edge. I was prescribed for a while ADHD medication, like I'm used to in Europe. Like born and raised there, I moved here in 2012. Did not hear about ADHD until I came here. Like in Europe, like the doctor, you cannot not tell your parents, oh, I cannot focus, because with a slap around your head, you gotta focus real quick. But the point is, I totally get what you're saying, and I understand like that your body, like even coffee. Yeah, you drink a coffee a day for 30 days straight. I guarantee you, on the 30th day, you're not gonna feel the same boost of energy. Right. Yeah. And you're gonna need two. Yes. And then that just builds on top of it. And then we're talking about amphetamines. It's like Huberman said, cocaine. Yes. Yeah. Right. Be honest, that's.
Well, but yeah, the pharmaceutical companies in general. You're going from one pill to another to balance out that, and then all to the next thing. It's not really a problem. It's just finding something to deal with it
in a cycle that is just becomes like impossible to get out of it. But I digress. So
I think that's a really great point. I think that was something that instead of even asking like, are you sleeping enough? What's your diet like? Are you exercising? What are you thinking about when you zone out? I was just given pills, and I was like, these are doctors, so they must know what's best for me. And at the end of it, I felt like a shell of a person. And I gave 28 years old at the time. I gave myself 2 years. I was like, if I don't find happiness by the time I'm 30, I'm just going to call it quits and put a bullet in my head. And that was the point at which I quit my job. I sold my house. I moved back to Boston. I was actually teaching at the University of Florida at the time. And a week later, we went into lockdowns. And
right when COVID.
Yeah, when COVID hit. Because in Florida, this was not really a big deal. But I came to Boston, and it was it was in a different country. Went into lockdowns. I had just moved in with a new boyfriend that I'd been dating for 3 months. And he started noticing all my patterns because we were in lockdowns together. He was like, you gotta quit this shit because you're addicted. And that was the point at which I quit everything at once. And it was painful. I went through severe withdrawals, shaking, sweating, hot flashes.
Trying to quit amphetamines, cold turkey,
You try to wean down at first, so I wouldn't take any. But the days I took even a little bit, it ramped up to 3-4 times the amount. I couldn't control myself. So that was the point at which I had to get it out of the house. A friend of mine had given me a bag of mushrooms, and I did them recreationally in undergrad, and this time I reached for them as an escape because I always remembered them being a good time. And the mushrooms were like, no, we're gonna pay attention to everything you've been avoiding for the last 20 years. And it was 20 years of therapy in 5 hours. I spent most of that experience crying on the couch. Voice inside was like, you can't change the past, so what are you gonna do, sit around crying about it for the rest of your life, or are you gonna get up and do something about it? That was the point at which I realized I needed to start meditating more regularly outside of mushrooms. And so that's what's the trigger for me. So that's when I started sitting in silence and paying attention to my thoughts.
Gotcha, interesting. Anyhow, when you realize start taking all kinds of different medication, and then once you're like completely, of course, you'll have a longer journey to kind of to happen. But then you realize just take a little bit of time to kind of the actual things that caused all the situations that you've been kind of through, like what was the reason for the ADHD, and what was, just the symptoms. Like it's pretty much all these, or most of these medications will just treat the surface level. It will not treat the cause at all.
I think it's kind of fascinating because you said one thing that I think is pretty much what I think you're all about, and I think what a lot of people have a hard time understanding is sometimes to solve something, you have to go back and look at, okay, what is the problem, and kind of down step by step. Now, it seems like when you did that mushrooms, when you were trying to get off of everything else, you had that kind of experience. Was it something that you knew you had to do going into it? So like into that, you were like, all right, I need to figure out what is the root causes of everything? Or was it actually the mushroom, trip or whatever we want to call it? Do you think that brought you to there, or do you think you had that consciously in your head that helped it kind of get your mind to a point to actually think and kind of down kind of thing?
That's such a good question, because I could be a little bit of both, because there was a voice before I even did the mushrooms that said, all right, we're giving ourselves 2 years. Why 2 years? I don't know. But at that point, it seems like something inside me had decided that, no, we're going to figure this out. Now, perhaps that was already subconsciously underneath, and the mushrooms further expanded on that, and whatever that experience was made me realize on a deeper level that I really needed to make some changes.
Oh, that's amazing. Because I think the root of, goes through anxiety, everything goes through, especially in this day and age. And I think not a lot of people think of it like that. They think of, okay, I take to get this done, instead of, hey, no, I have to have it go a little bit bad before I can get it to be good, and kind of, instead of just kind of up or coping with it kind of thing. So amazing.
So the process that you are helping your clients with right now is, can you walk us through, like, first of all, who's the ideal client? Is it a business owner, or it can be just a busy, or like what ideal avatar pretty much?
Okay, so I typically do work with executives. Now, with that said, I've worked with a lot of individuals who weren't perhaps executives, anywhere from teachers to homemakers. It really depends, because there are several people who come to me because of their addictions to psychiatric medications. I have a huge clientele where we work specifically on helping them get off of the medication and then replace their microdosing or a macrodose, and help them sustain that same feeling through yoga and meditation moving forward. The process is there's setting, and so support, essentially. So the set mindset, we have to make sure that the mindset in a place where it's aware of how it's even working. Because oftentimes the scariest part of a psychedelic experience is you perhaps weren't necessarily aware of the inner workings of your own mind, and then all of a sudden you become aware of it, and it's scary to really take a look at who you are or who you've become. So for 6 weeks, we take the effort to look into what the inner critic's dialogue is like, and what are the self-judgments that might be present. Then we do the psychedelic experience, which is usually a 5-hour experience. I use the same playlist that Johns Hopkins created for their psychedelic therapy sessions. My clients use an eye mask, and we do an entire ceremony of cleansing, gratitude, and intention setting before even taking the mushrooms.
So it's like a guided session type of thing?
Well, once they take the mushrooms, I'm only there to make sure they're physically, mentally, and emotionally stable and taking detailed notes. Clients talk throughout the entire time. Some clients do go into a deep meditative state, and then they come out 3 hours later and they have tons to say. The most part, most clients talk the entire time, and I take notes. Then we do a debrief, and we do 6 more weeks of rewiring limiting beliefs. So the way psychedelics work is, imagine a hill with snow. So you take a sled down that hill, and those sleds make grooves. Over time, certain grooves become deeper than the others, so no matter where you take the sled down from the top, the deepest grooves pull you in. These are our habit formations. What psychedelics do is they lay down a whole new layer of snow and give your consciousness the chance to create new grooves. Allows you to create new habits or addictions, whatever you want to call them, like the first 3 to 6 weeks after the psychedelic experience.
So it's like of the brain and
Yes.
kind of, I mean, that's, I think we're like everything. Everyone has habits, but a lot of the habits you get are so entwined in your mind because you've been doing them before you even knew that they were habits, whether you learned it from when you were a kid and then you just always been doing that it's sometimes hard to even realize what habits you even have, let alone how to break them and fix them. I mean, everyone thinks of like the normal habit if you overeat, if you maybe drink too much, if you know, little stuff like that, and okay, just stopping doing that. And that's tough enough for some people, like smoking, you know, quitting smoking. But for you to rework like hey, you don't even know are bad or detrimental to life, I think must be a whole other kind of realm of and then obviously difficulty as well.
Yeah, I think we as human beings have an autopilot feature. And when that autopilot feature doesn't serve us, we call them addictions. And when it does serve us, we call them good habits. But at the end of the day, it's just an autopilot feature that we've decided certain actions are just on autopilot and the brain or the system is working off of memory. And so what psychedelics allow us to do is, it resets the memory a little and allows you to rewire some of those pathways.
And so, what I'm curious, person is wired differently. More just natively more motivated than others, and some people are softer, more aggressive or whatever. How many categories of this psychedelics are, and how do people are able to even choose from them? Like, what I mean, like how an assessment standpoint, how can someone, if someone is trying to do this themselves, are you able to? Like, for example, I know, like, like an injury and I need to get some ibuprofen or whatever for pain. Like, I know that's not gonna necessarily do anything for example, I know what I'm trying to find some things like I'm not, or at least I don't tend to enjoy if I have to, like I fast during the day. Mm-hmm. I know for a fact that if at this, like at 3:30 p.m., if I eat carbs now, after 15 minutes, I'll literally be asleep. Like
you don't want to do anything afterwards.
Yeah, the way that carbs, like I know I'm not touching carbs between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. After 6 p.m., I'll eat all carbs that I want. So from that point of view, is there a way that people can actually through all these categories of psychedelics and know, like, I'm gonna do this because I'm gonna try this because I know it might be a softer version of some other, because I know, like, I'm afraid of my past type of thing, right? Yeah. Someone else might say, well, I don't know if I want to.
I even think, like, get into, like, how many different types are there that people can choose from? And then are they different per one that help people go into a different direction kind of thing, depending on what they're trying, end results kind of are?
There are hundreds, probably thousands of different psychedelics. The main ones that most people are aware of are mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, DMT, and combo. So those are some of the ones that are a little more mainstream, perhaps. They do all serve a different purpose. Now, I would ask you first, when you go to a pharmacy and you see ibuprofen, naproxen, acetaminophen, they're all painkillers. How do you choose one?
Like advertisement and,
That's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Like, I try to avoid taking any kind of like actual pills, just because I take all kinds of supplements and vitamins and whatnot.
Yeah,
but yeah, good question. Just is what I grew up with. Like, my parents gave me, I don't know, like, I'm pretty sure my mom at some point in time,
right? If Advil has a bigger bottle and it stands out more and they're advertising more on TV, people will lean to go there. I can guarantee you no one even knows the difference. I'm going to tell you that I don't know the difference between ibuprofen, Advil, Tylenol, the whole 9 yards.
Right, and at the end of the day, they're a painkiller. It resolves a symptom of pain. And so psychedelics can be similar, that the end goal could be the same, where at the end you might feel clarity or peace. But the road there, or the process there through these different medicines, is different, and it all comes down to and research, essentially. So each one will feel different, will provide a little bit of a different process, and yet at the same time they provide similar results depending on your own wiring.
Gotcha. So you kind of have to microdose / test until you find whatever kind of works for you. Is that kind of?
Yes, and so there are things like MDMA, for example, is not technically a psychedelic. It's more of a dissociative. So you feel really good. There's not too much hallucination, but it allows you to detach from your emotions and allows you the experience of acceptance without being lost in the story itself. And a lot of psychedelics do this, where you there's a little bit of space between your thoughts and emotions and your consciousness. Whereas on a daily basis, we tend to believe that we are our thoughts and emotions, but that's just not the case. We are a consciousness that has experiences. Then we, as human beings, apply perception to those experiences. Those perceptions create our belief systems, which then spawn our thoughts and emotions, and then show up in our actions unconsciously, creating unconscious results. And it's not until we go back to the original belief system and change the perception that we applied onto it, or even remove the perception and create a little bit of distance between our experience and our thoughts and feelings, that we're actually able to heal and rewire.
So this would benefit someone that's going through some type of like stress situation, anxiety, or any blood work involved? Like, do you have to do some blood work? Like, for example, if you have a couple types of minerals that you're missing in your body, or like, is that even a thing, or no, it doesn't involve any of the blood work in this process?
Practices don't necessarily involve blood work. Now, in modern society, yes, there are a lot of individuals who might decide to get their blood work done. My own clients, I do measure cardiovascular data and sleep data during and after the experience. So we use either whoop bands or aura rings. We also have vests at our retreats that measure the cardiovascular data. And what we found is that which is heart rate variability, the most accurate representation of the stress in our body, that goes up, and resting heart rate goes down and sustains for an average of up to 4 weeks after the psilocybin session, which means your system has become a little more still and stable, and you're perceiving less stress in life. Because even stress is all a perception. Most of us don't realize that the only problems that we have is thinking we have problems.
I mean, I agree 100% because you realize, I can take this example. A couple months ago, I found out that my dad had a medical issue. He had to do surgery and a couple other things. So he's still back where I'm from, in Romania. And when my mom called me, I was like, regardless if I thought before that phone call that I have to deal with 100 different things business related, and maybe like that I deal with stress is maybe I get stressed for 5 minutes and then I kind of on the side and then I deal with it like, all right, a solution, whatever it is. But then when that happened, kind of me of why I deal with stress that way is sometimes we create that stressful environment on ourselves because we just react to the problems in the wrong way, and we just amplify it like just becomes a cycle that it just never ends. But then you realize like that's a real problem that I was like I almost had to deal with, so I was ready to like leave everything behind. And then an hour after the call, I'm like, see, like it's not actually a problem until you make it a problem. Right. So that I relate to what you said on that. That's why I pointed it out.
So even stress, I've come to see that there are about 7 different kinds of mindsets that most people resonate in. So the first 4 are typically the kinds that people enter into the program with and usually transition into the latter 3. The first one is victim mindset. So this is the individual who thinks, why is life happening to me? Oh, woe is me. I feel overwhelmed, a lot of anxiety. People are also master manipulators at getting other people to feel guilty for them to do work for them. Then there's the conflict mindset. This is the average CEO that I worked with, that it's all blame. It's like everything is your fault. They have a hard time getting their employees to do what they really need them to do. There's the acceptance mindset. I call this Band-Aid mode. General thought here is or good enough, and just put a Band-Aid over it without actually addressing the underlying issues. Then there's service mode. Now, I think the giver mentality is truly where true happiness comes from, but not at the cost of yourself. So a lot of these individuals have poor boundaries. They give, and then they expect others to give just as much in return. And when they don't receive that, or doesn't align with their expectation, they begin to feel resentful. Then the latter three is the opportunist. The opportunity mindset is like growth mindset. And you start going from why is this happening to me to how is this happening for me and what am I learning from this experience? Then there's the creative mindset. The creator starts to tap into flow. They start losing track of time. They're completely involved in what they love doing and they're serving purpose. And then there's finally the guru mindset that detaches from everything, realizes that this is all an illusion. I stop believing that why is life happening to me or even why is life happening for me and start realizing actually life is happening from me. And so these different mindsets show us how we react to stress. So I do a full mindset assessment. And what I'm realizing is that at the lower levels, we react to stress immediately. Whereas at the higher levels, we don't react anymore. We respond because we've essentially cultivated responsibility, where the word respond even comes from. Individuals have taken responsibility for their life actions, and then they respond to life rather than reacting. So to answer your question from earlier, that who is this for? It can be for anyone who's struggling with addiction, to individuals who are at that level 4 or 5 and trying to tap into high performance and wanting to learn how to create life from themselves rather than reacting or responding to it.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And even the categories that you kind of put, like how people respond to different things. I can't remember exactly where I've read, they're kind of worded a little bit differently. I can tell like you're doing this on a daily basis and you're really passionate about it because just you remembered every single one of them with so much attention to detail. Like I can tell you're passionate about it. So it's not even, if you think about it, it's not even like who is this for, is where do you fit into
Where
this?
do you fit, yeah.
Yes, what is your intention?
Like what level?
Yeah.
What do you think is because even like in your story, you realize, okay, it needs to change. You had kind of that moment in your head. What do you think for most of your clients, or just in general, what do you think that trigger is for most people when they start realizing, okay, I got to sit myself down and look into this, and we got to start doing something about it?
I think for most people, the trigger is usually when the pain of not changing outweighs the pain of changing. That's the point at which they're like, let me just go through the process of quitting the drugs. It's actually more painful to just be addicted to them, for example. Or let me just go through the process of looking into why I'm so angry and agitated all the time, and just sitting in anger and agitation for the rest of my life.
That makes sense. You mentioned you do this in a retreat format, right? How many days is that?
Usually 5. Yeah.
Have you seen after the retreat, when people are going back to their own environments, back to again, at every corner type of thing, again surrounded? Because a lot of times, if we're talking what kind of addictions we're talking about, but sometimes you have the wrong type of people that you're being surrounded with, and then the addictions come from that part. Like let's say, a couple of social circles, and everybody's just like with phone calls and texts Friday and Saturday. You have to go out and drink, and maybe you want to quit alcohol for whatever reason. That's going to be a tricky, to deal with. But the reason I'm asking you is, I was watching a podcast. It was a video podcast, and they were talking about how U.S. soldiers that were dealing with
post-traumatic stress.
The heroin addiction, but when they were back in the States, I don't know, like a really high percentage, like 9 of them did not kind of back into heroin again because the environment was completely changed.
Yeah.
So that kind of my mind when you said, all right, we're doing these retreats. How are people able to their way of thinking during those 5 days, or you find a challenge in working and kind of pace after the retreat is over? It's almost like the same thing when you go to business events. Like you're hyped, like you started coming back to, I was going to events and then I was coming back in the office and I was trying to explain Victor and then other guys in the office, like, I have to do this and that. But it's like hard to try to replicate what you felt during those days to people at home. So then when your clients are coming back at home, like you give them some type of what you should tell your spouse, or like, you know what I mean? To not try to what happened here, because they're not going to be able to refeel that experience, right?
Yes, I think that is something we talk about, that like you're feeling amazing right now, And you might go back into a board meeting and be like, hey guys, like, let's cut this meeting short today. Like, life is short. And I think that's part of why integration is just so incredibly important, that we never do a retreat without the prep work and the integration afterwards. Another thing that's really powerful about the retreat model is that we pair it with group coaching. So we'll do 3 weeks of prep beforehand with the same group. It's the same group that goes to Jamaica or wherever we're hosting the retreat. They experience that. And then afterwards, they also do together as a group and do meetups. And so in this way, the group then has a small community that they're starting to grow with. And then as we do more groups begin to get added to that community, and that's how individuals have a chance to actually change, because you have other people in your network who went through a similar change. Now in the model where we're not doing group work, this is actually what we address on the first session. So in the first session, I'll usually do a values activity. And a great way to figure out what our values are is by looking at our 3 best and 3 worst decisions and why. That will reveal what you truly value versus what you think you value based off of what you've been taught. Off of those values, we then do a companion audit and a life audit of every decision you make, whether that's spending money, eating food, whatever it is, aligning with your core values. And then moving forward, the people you're hanging out with, are their values aligning with your core values? Because if you're truly wanting to change, your values don't align with the people that you're surrounding yourself with. And there's a great adage that, an average of like the 5 people that we hang around.
Yeah,
So true.
And so if we want to change, then it's important for us to change that environment as well.
100%.
Now, do you feel, so when you do the retreats with everyone, and you said there's typically how many people at each retreat?
I try to keep it a 6 to 8.
Gotcha. And do they know correlation with each other? None of them know each other? Or do you get like couples, for instance, going to the same one? And is that problematic when couples are doing it the same way? Experience kind of that.
People don't necessarily know each other until we start doing the prep work beforehand. When it comes to couples or friends that are coming together to these retreats, typically the rule is separate yourselves. Especially during the psychedelic experience, we lay out mats, and we recommend that you separate yourselves. Don't lay down right next to your friend or your partner, because you are on your journey alone. This is yours and yours alone to take.
Do you feel, is there a lot of people that go into like their lifestyle and then want to go to another retreat? Like, is a X amount of time a year thing that you can do? Do you feel like a lot of people want to go every year, every 2 years, just to kind of get those values and kind of that feeling so it lasts, amount of time? Or kind of one, and then the rest of it is just implementing it and kind of recreate, but trying to work with what you learned,
I think it's a mixture of both. I've had several clients where they just had the one experience and they completely changed their life around and was like, that was enough for me. I never want to do it again. And at the same time, I've had an equal number of clients who stayed with me beyond the 12-week program and decided to continue coaching and continue working on whatever was coming up for them and reset every 6 to 12 months.
Oh, awesome.
Interesting I'm trying to kind of a little bit of a plan. So if someone, I'm sure you get this a lot, actually I should ask you, what are the common objections that you hear when you talk to people about this?
Common objections I hear is scared of what I'll see. And typically they're afraid of what they'll see is because they're afraid of seeing themselves. And that's a lot of the reason why so many people have trouble finding love as well, because true love acts as a mirror that shows you a true reflection of yourself as well. And for a lot of us, that can be very painful. So that's one thing that I hear often, I'm scared of what I'll see. Number 2 is, I don't do drugs. To which I usually retort with, do you drink alcohol, take painkillers, and eat sugar?
I was curious.
Everything.
I was curious to hear if you actually mentioned sugar.
Yeah.
The
drugs that
those are the most dangerous.
They're probably doing a lot worse than anything else.
Yeah, I recently saw a study, and be completely off, that shared that the effect that sugar has on our liver is almost 10 times as worse as alcohol, and the only reason we don't notice it is because sugar doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier the way alcohol does. And it's crazy, and alcohol both have histories of killing people.
It's not taboo. It's
Yeah.
all, mainstream.
It's not just the liver. I mean, sugar, like all
It's everything,
type of diseases
Yeah.
and all that. Like
A disease of the modern world.
Yeah.
Diabetes doesn't exist in nature. If you've ever noticed, like, don't get diabetes or
Yeah.
cancer. Not unless they're living with
Unless,
us.
exactly, unless they're domestic.
Misconception. War on drugs, that it was a very powerful campaign that worked. It worked in making people scared. But I think that's changing. I think Johns Hopkins really changed the field once again, and there's a lot more research going on. But there is resistance because these threaten a lot of our institutions, for example. That would doctors do if there weren't any more sick people?
Oh, I mean, applies to like a lot of different. Like probably it's been about a year since I've started studying and using and testing a lot of different peptides. But you talk to a regular doctor about them, and you'll see that it's like they're in their vocabulary in terms of, and it's impossible to not be aware of it. I mean, nowadays, everywhere, like doesn't matter what disease you're talking about, there is a peptide that could help with at least a small portion of disease. But anyway, I digress again. So let's kind of whole concept, like where do you place psychedelics? Like, do you place them together with peptides? Do you place them together with, pretty sure they're their own category, but I'm trying to kind of picture for someone that's maybe thought about it, but then again, misconceptions and a lot of other things that they've heard about friends, right? Like all kinds of different things. How would you, if we're talking to somebody that's like a 10-year-old level, obviously not talking to a child about psychedelics, but how can we simplify explanation of this is what they are and this is how you can slowly kind of with them. You know what I mean?
I would say that psychedelics definitely, and this is personal and bias, to the category of medicine for me. That is a tool that can be used as a medicine. It is also a tool that can be used for spiritual connection. And it really all depends on your intention behind it. What's so incredible about psychedelics is that it's an interactive tool. It's almost as if the medicine and you are in this dance together, and it knows what you need and you know need from it. And so I think I would call that at its simplest form a tool for healing.
Another thing that you mentioned that I didn't get a chance to kind of go deeper, you said some people are just afraid of what they'll see at the other end of the tunnel, right? Let's define that. Like, are people afraid of their own memories, or maybe memories that they try to bury throughout childhood, maybe like abuse or other type of things? Or like exactly would you define, how would you define that?
Be a personal example. For me, one of the hardest experiences was realizing that the person that I was trying to run away from becoming was the exact person I had become. So when I left home, I was like, I'm never going to treat others the way I was treated. I'm breaking the cycle. And this very virtuous goal allowed me to move forward. Except what started happening was I started hitting my dog. I started hitting my ex-husband. I would get blackout drunk, say nasty, terrible things, do nasty, terrible things, and then never think about it again. It would just be suppressed underneath. And that experience that I had where I felt like it was 20 years of therapy in 5 hours was exactly that, where I was reminded of everything I'd done and forced to accept even those dark parts. I think we all have a shadow side, and it all depends on how integrated it is. That the more we suppress it, the more it comes out. But the more we accept it, the more power and control we actually have to respond to life rather than react to it.
Gotcha. And I know, without mentioning, and the episode is not sponsored by any kind of brand or anything like that, but is this prescription only? Is it not? Like, do people not need a prescription for this? Do you go to their regular doctor? Do they have to go to like one of the regular teleclinics? Like how again, you go online and I'm sure you'll find a million different websites that would sell it, but how would you know legit, right?
Unfortunately, the whole industry is kind of wild, wild west right now because it's unregulated. And I'm not sure if regulation is what the industry needs either. We saw this with cannabis, that as soon as it got regulated, all of a sudden we have so many different hybrids and strains that none of them are even close to what the original marijuana plant that. So I'm not sure if regulation and legalization is the best course of action. Now, with that said, because of that, there is no prescription for it. Now, with that said, there are several areas, for example, Oregon and Colorado. Oregon has legalized it. Colorado, the whole state, has decriminalized it. Same in several areas in Massachusetts, DC. There are several cities all over California as well that have decriminalized it. So it's actually, you as a consumer can grow it yourself.
When you say, I'm sorry for, is it city by city? Meaning like cities decriminalized it and some didn't?
Yes.
That's crazy if you think about it.
Yeah. For example, it's decriminalized in Somerville. Perhaps not in
Medford.
The exact place I was thinking. That's crazy.
What was the yesterday we had a podcast and we were talking about like there's a group Cambridge and Somerville.
What would make one city or town decriminalize it compared to the other one? Is it just who's in charge and you vote on it kind of thing?
Right now it's been a grassroots effort in Massachusetts, and so it's been city by city because the people of those towns and cities made a push for it. Yeah.
They did some kind of
signatures. And got enough to have it put on the ballot to decriminalize.
So the trend it's actually bigger.
Now, outside of city, state, and even the U.S. wise, outside of the U.S., how is psychedelics treated differently than it is in the U.S.? Is it more like less taboo in parts of the world? Is it the same as some countries? Like a little bit on how it varies from country to country.
Okay, so for example, countries like Jamaica, it's legal there. It's very normal. It's part of their culture. It's like, oh yes, I did some mushrooms. The answer isn't like, gosh, what was your experience like? Or like, did you get what you were looking for? Like it's part of the culture there. Because, for example, it's not legal there, and yet it's very ingrained into the culture where someone's experiencing depression. The first inclination is take to the apothecary to get microdosing capsules. That's just part of the culture. Europe, there's several areas in Europe that have decriminalized it. But there's a lot of Europe that it's illegal. Truffles, for example, are not illegal in several parts of Europe, which are they're like mushrooms.
Gotcha. They come in like a lot of different forms. Like for example, do people make cookies with them? Like what most typical? Like, because I know you just said microdosing capsules. So that like just the regular capsule, maybe instead of having it 20 milligrams, you have now broken down into 5 milligrams piece, right? What most common form?
Common form, you can make teas out of it. If you have the raw mushroom, you can make teas out of it. A lot of people will put them into chocolates as well. For microdosing, I've seen them anywhere from capsules to gummies to even little tinctures. So it really depends on where you are. So for example, you go to California, you're gonna find a bunch of different ways that it's being served to you versus Boston, you might just get the raw mushrooms.
Boston doesn't mess with
yeah.
going away.
And does it affect like the usage of it, what you experience? Does it vary from how you ingest it, whether it be tea or if it's made in an edible chocolate? Does it affect, other than obviously the amount that you're taking, does it affect how it works at all?
Yes, it can affect it. So, for example, if it's the water's too hot, the psyllium become less potent. Whereas if you use the process called lemon teching, which is you put the grind up mushrooms, put it in pure lemon juice or some kind of citric acid for about 20 minutes, it actually pulls the psilocybin out and it makes it easier to digest. You have less, or the reports are less nausea, and it hits a lot faster as well.
It's crazy. I learned a lot just by talking to you today. Is there a story from your clients that just stands out like in all the other stories?
She's like every single client of mine.
I do have one story that does stand out. One of my clients was a professional hockey player, and his career ended because of a neck injury back in 2006. And he got addicted to painkillers, ultimately ended up becoming depressed because his identity was put into question. This was something he had been working for his entire life. He was in the league for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then his career ended. And now all of a sudden his entire identity is being questioned. On top of that, he's taking these medications. By the time he comes to me, he's like, his neck is stiff. He can't really, he's depressed. He doesn't feel like he's showing up as a father. He has this experience, during the psilocybin experience, he sees his late father. He sees his father's spirit, and the father tells him that everything's gonna be okay. Then another spirit comes in and says, you see what I can show you? That's not all I can do. And the spirit takes a huge syringe, pulls the pain out from his neck, and since then he hasn't had any neck pain, which I think is insane.
I just got goosebumps. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, that I think is one of the most interesting stories, that there's physical healing as well. I've another client as well who had irritable bowel syndrome for as long as he could remember it. Anytime he was in a rush or feeling stressed, he had to go to the bathroom. Like his fight or flight reflex would just kick in. And during the psilocybin experience, he realized that part of why he was always like edge was because as a child, his father was in the military. He started drinking a lot and became explosive. And so around his father, he always felt like he had to walk on eggshells. And so from that point onward, his fight or flight reflex had been triggered. And so during this psilocybin experience, once he made that connection, didn't experience irritable bowel syndrome for the first time in his life after 70 years of having gone through that. Wow. So I think what I'm starting to realize is almost every physical manifestation of pain or illness that we have is actually an energetic imbalance first that then begins to vibrate at a frequency that creates physical imbalance or illness.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you feel, and kind of coming up, and do you feel like it's more psychedelics help you like get a higher consciousness of mind, and that's kind of is helping these people through even physical pain, emotional pain, and you think it's the that get you there, or do you think it's something else kind of thing? Because that's where my mind goes. Obviously, I think that mind can control and create anything, and then maybe we just need something that gets us to that point that our minds can do that. Is that kind of how you feel the psychedelics kind of everything, or do you think of in a different way kind of thing?
I think psychedelics create just enough space between our thoughts, emotions, and our consciousness. And I'll give you an example that a few years back, I was having an argument with my husband, and I don't know, I think it was maybe about dishes. It blew out of proportion, and I started screaming, and then I started crying, and then I went downstairs, and I just started crying, and the story in my mind was, I can't believe he did that. It's all his fault. He triggered me. And somewhere along the way, same day I had microdosed a little. And somewhere along the way in that story, my consciousness was like, is it his fault? Aren't you choosing how you feel right now? You can stop crying right now if you decided to. And that's the power of psychedelics, that it allows you to be like, wait, am I really upset?
It's like perspective.
Yeah, or am I just like story to like aspire inside for no reason?
Wow. Wow. That's...
Yeah, I mean, it's look at it from so many different angles,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's not necessarily just like to this conversation with you. I was under the impression that it can mostly either used for recreational purposes or a situation of, and I didn't realize that it can help with addiction and other, like your physical
Avenues
pain
and so
and
many
stuff
things,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah. We're getting close now to wrapping things up. Is there a question that you wish we would have asked you and we haven't?
The question for you guys.
Yeah.
There was one law you could create in the whole world for the whole world to follow. What would it be?
Everyone has to use premium Q moving to move.
Shameless plug.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I think just like, talking about traits and in people's mindsets, there's so many grooves that were created that are so deep that everyone goes down. I think a lot of the laws that people follow today follow that same suit. It's so ingrained in all of our laws and how everyone has lived for X amount of years that everyone just thinks that it's what you need to follow. and instead there might be a better way, and things aren't really evolving like they should as far as laws go. I think just on everything you learn, and obviously not just going off of kind of what conversation is, but I think that law-wise definitely needs to take a look at what pharmaceuticals are and what other options of it, whether it's a root, a mushroom, whether it's just, organic thing that you can take to help with, pain and, stuff, anything like that. I think that's probably the biggest one that I think would do the most benefits for people everywhere. Not necessarily saying that, hey, listen, no more pharmaceuticals, but just know that there's other options out there and, make them so taboo or so against the grain kind of thing.
Yes, my turn of thought in this whole law, like I was thinking, well, rules are made to be broken.
Yeah.
So I would create a law that would allow most laws to be bent, but of course to a certain degree. Like I'm talking about you drinking
Murder.
No, yeah, I'm talking about you being allowed to drink alcohol, and then the fact that you hit another car but nobody died inside, that doesn't mean that you're right. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about like, let's say, have like a spouse or somebody that's in the back of like in your car and it's just feeling bad, and you have to get them to emergency room, and then you just speed up twice the speed and nothing happens. Well, that's a rule in my, that's a law in my opinion that, right, it happened, you got there with the person, it's a valid point, nobody was injured in the way, but you got caught by one of the cameras, and now you have to, whatever, it's they want to take your license or whatnot. Like, right, I'm talking about stuff like that.
Yeah.
But on the other side, to keep it kind of the topic, I'm a big proponent of people should be allowed to take whatever they want to take in their bodies without legal consequences, unless you're not doing some, like, eat somebody else, right? Yes. So if you want to test all the psychedelics, I should not be worried like, oh, this city it's not legal, or I am not allowed to take, and this applies to like if it's a steroid, or if it's a psychedelic, or if it's a peptide, or if it's talking to a doctor in Mexico, he said peptides are not legal there. I'm like, you can go in a pharmacy and literally buy Adderall and steroids, like with no prescription, but peptides are illegal, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of like, I would create a law that would allow you to bend other laws without, as long as you're not causing damage to somebody else.
Man, if I were to create a law, it's between three. I think one would be everyone has to sit in silence for 15 minutes a day.
I would struggle with that.
Yeah, in silence with yourself. I think that alone might.
Loud music,
help.
I'm fine, but sitting without, I would.
Just you and your thoughts.
I struggle with that a little bit. Maybe at first, like I don't know.
Why do you think that is? Because
number one is I don't like the chill sensation, or just like the now. Don't get me wrong. If I'm on an island with my wife, my phone like in airplane mode, and I can swim with, I can go snorkel and do all kinds of things. I would, like in that environment, I could be for like 2 hours straight, just with myself in silence. Because that's like on the bottom of the ocean. I don't know if you ever scuba dive.
Peaceful.
The most peaceful thing ever. But put me in my bedroom or in my office, and I don't know, like give me a pair of headphones and don't allow me to put any sound. It's just,
I think a lot more people would struggle sitting in silence for 15 minutes than you would think.
Yeah.
This is a lot more than you think.
Yeah. I think we should do it.
Yeah.
But I was up for a challenge, Like I'm
everyone would look at life a lot different, or even feel a lot different if they did that.
Yeah.
Every new thing, we should try that.
Yeah.
In the office, everyone's going to 15 minutes of silence before the work day.
And you notice all your judgments come up about other people, about other things, about yourself. And that's where the work
is.
Begins,
my dog allowed?
Your dog.
Yeah, we're just going to stay in silence for much longer.
Oh, no. Trust me. He sits in silence for like, I'll be in the office.
But he's sleeping.
I think number 2 would be running for a political office. Must do psychedelics with the opponent.
Oh, boy.
I wonder how many issues that would resolve. We might even have more civil campaigns.
I can imagine Trump and Biden in the same room doing psychedelics.
That'd be amazing.
And what's the third?
That'd be amazing.
The third would be to replace fluoride in our drinking water with psilocybin.
Yeah, there you go.
Just mild doses where everyone's slightly.
We'll call Gary for that one. We'll see if Gary can switch a little.
Let's hear his opinion on that. This was fun. Where can people connect with you? What's the best way for people reaching out to you if they want to ask you questions? Maybe, I don't know if you're doing consultations or if they want to listen to your podcast.
I'm the only Palveshey on the internet. It shouldn't be hard to find. Palveshi. You can follow me on Instagram at Palveshey or go to palveshey.com and send me a message.
Want to add before?
Yeah, everyone for listening. Palveshey, thank you very much for coming on. I mean, we have a lot of guests, and a lot of them are in obviously business like you are, and they're passionate about what they do. But for you, you can tell that it goes way beyond that in the way and how passionate you are, and just the education that you were able to instill in the hour that you've been here. It's been that will take for a while now. So I want to personally thank you for coming on. Thank you
so much. I had a great time.
It was great having you. And by the way, guys, of course, we'll put all the links in the description below. If you have any questions that you want to be addressed on the podcast or any guests that you'd like to suggest, the first link in the show notes is, as always, allows you to record your voice up to a minute, or up to 2 minutes, I think. But either way, thanks a lot, everyone, for supporting the show. And by the way, the easiest way to support the show is to just rate and review both Apple and Spotify. I'd suggest Apple. I'm an iPhone guy. Spotify is fine too. But yeah, everyone, we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.